Welcome back to The Edge. Dr. Pete Meyer, thank you so much for jumping on board with us at the edge of the web today.
Thanks for having me.
You are more than welcome. Well, let me just let everybody know who Dr. Meyer here, a.k.a. Dr. Pete. All right. He's a marketing scientist for the Seattle-based Moz, where he works with the marketing and data science teams on product research and data-driven content.
Is that on your business card?
He's also
He's
also been working on the Mozcast project for the last 3 years, and it's a tool that actually curates the Google algorithm history, a chronicle of Google updates that date back to 2002. That's what we've been paying attention to for the last decade is these changes, and Moz has done a great job of being able to convey that and showing us how to understand what's happening inside of the Google space. So thanks for joining our show today, Dr. Pete. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, I got a question for you. I got to ask you, are you a real doctor?
Yeah, I actually have a areyouarealdoctor.com will go to me because I get this asked so much.
Yes.
The short answer is I have a PhD in human experimental psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of, depending on your point of view.
That's awesome.
Actually, what was really funny is I checked out that small website, the blog that you've got here, and I got to quote this. This is too darn funny. Before you go running off telling everyone Dr. Pete isn't a real doctor, let me ask you something. As an MD, an MD spends 4 years on medical school plus residency learning how to make you feel better. A PhD psychologist spends 5 to 6 years learning how to mess with your head. Now, which one do you really want to piss off? That was a beautiful line. I appreciate it. All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Doc.
Yeah,
Can he call you Doc?
Can I call you Doc?
You can call me Doc. You can call me Pete. You can call me what you like. I'm used to it. Yeah, so I have a computer science undergrad, and long story short, I finished my PhD in '97. And when I had finished my bachelor's degree, I really wanted to get into the internet world, and it was really starting to take off. And then finally did when I was in grad school. So I kind of dropped everything and finished and went to work for a startup. And by startup, I mean one guy in an abandoned warehouse with a stack of boxes who was going to be an ISP, ASP like everybody else in '97. And giant centipedes and rats and asbestos and you name it, we had it, except for heat, which we didn't have, or garbage collection. And so, yeah, I found myself in this abandoned warehouse, and he already had about 12 hosting clients, and he would leave 3 to 4 times a week to consult and actually pay the bill somewhere else. And so it was just me and the servers and the phone and people yelling at me. And they would yell things at me like, why don't I rank, which at the time was on, Yahoo and Alta Vista and Hotbot and some of those.
Yep.
And so being the only one there, I could either unplug the phone or try and figure it out. And so I tried to figure it out.
There was another option. You could have unplugged the phone.
I could have unplugged the phone, but yeah, I'm not that smart, apparently. So I wanted to keep getting paid. So, yeah, I ended up 8 years later, I was vice president of that company, and we had 15 employees, and suddenly the internet world had changed, and we had survived the dot-com boom and bust and become an ASP in the trade show space. And so I kind of decided I hated trade shows, which I've softened on since then. But went and started my own consulting firm, and so I was doing search consulting for about 8 years and joined Moz full-time about 3 years ago. So
very cool.
Yeah, it's been a long, strange trip.
Yeah. I mean, you were one of the earliest adopters there, weren't you?
I was a reluctant SEO in the late 90s, I would say. I did it because they told me I had to, but about 10 years ago, I came back around and decided maybe it was all right after all.
But I mean, back then, and I was doing this as well way back then. I mean, it was like managing to steer a barge. The way the engines would actually react to the content changes and the structure changes. I mean, it was like a long distance visibility, trying to just see what you're truly affecting at the time. Now everything's so fast now; it's just amazing. Yep. But way back then, that was.
I was on social back then, before it was called social media, and so we would just list meme the crap out of out of each other. So we showed up ranked number 1 on everything. We cheated.
Yeah, we still with some clients were in the every day if the keyword was on the page 27 times and then it got blocked, we'd move it to 25, and then the next day we'd go back up to 27, and it was a game. It was a cat and mouse game, and in a way that's kind of what I hated about it at the time. I mean, the engines were so naive in a lot of ways, and I guess we did what we thought we had to do, but I think when I came back to it after a few years and saw how much more sophisticated it was and how really how much better it was for the people using it, that it really changed my viewpoint of SEO and brought me back around.
Very good. So are you the opinion that we're finally getting rid of some of the flotsam or the chafe out there, all of the black hatters that we were certainly appreciative of all the algorithm changes that Google does to kind of weed out the ones that are really messing it up for the rest of us. Do you think that there's the needle swinging our direction now?
I think it's at least more complicated now, and so the worst of it and the easiest cheating is gone.
Right.
On the other hand, there's so much more money in it now that there are people who are willing to spend the money to cheat, and some of them get away with it. But it depends on the industry. I was talking to somebody today about the payday loan space. So you may have heard that Google is going to cut a bunch of the ads in the payday loan space, just outright wipe them off the map. And they just said, we've had enough. And they were asking me, well, what might happen in organic? Are we going to see the same thing? And the problem with the whole penalty situation is if you have an industry that's just total crap, the entire industry, and you take the top 10 and you say, these top 10 are terrible, we're going to penalize them. Well, no matter how good your algorithm is or how good your penalty is, what's going to happen is that 11 to 20 are going to all move up 10, and they're also crap.
You just don't lop off the top 10. I mean, the entire industry
you've made a new top 10, but the top 100 are all terrible. So, now you have a new set of 10 terrible results. So if everything is terrible, then Google's job is really, really hard.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, they start crossing the line into what content they actually do want. It's their sandbox, obviously, right? But they do have this space where they're trying to clean up and make a pure series of listings here, but at the same time, they start getting into. I mean, was it last year, Doug? They were getting into the truth side of things, of being able to vet out what's actually true content as opposed to spurious content that's out there, and they were about to get themselves into a space that we really didn't want them to go. That they're starting to validate content.
Yeah, it was like
most fact-based search results.
Well, they're playing God.
We love you, Google. So obviously you were there. You're paying attention to that. Any thoughts in that space?
It's tough. I think they have to a point. They have to.
It's a consumer-driven model, obviously.
Well, they have to be able to extract information and not just spit back whatever we give them. But you're right. At the same time, at some point, it gets more subjective. It gets to be a judgment call. Yeah. And even this payday loan thing is not an issue of spam. It's an issue of them saying the industry itself is bad.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Now you've crossed. Now that's a whole different line to take.
They're judging a particular industry.
Yeah, and whether I agree or not, I happen to think the industry is pretty awful. But is that their place? There's a lawsuit. I think just this week was in the news that someone's successfully suing Google for a manual penalty, because they're essentially saying, as soon as you hand-picked me to remove, you're disadvantaging me. You're using your power to... Yeah. Now, whether I agree with that, when they step out of the algorithm, they can always say the machine did it. It's the robot's fault.
Right. Yeah, Google can say
we built it, but that's it.
But the end of the game is it's Google's sandbox, and the whole argument kind of falls apart.
Well, but it's our content, right?
It is.
I mean, it's their sandbox,
but we're adhering to what they're wanting from us. So whenever the guy comes in and sues, I mean, it's their economy that they've created to a particular point.
But how is that different from, let's say, a radio show that plays music?
Right.
Right. The radio show charges for advertising and everything else.
Right.
But you know what? They can get in trouble if they play the wrong music or if they violate, copyright or do whatever. They still have to respect the end, the end producer of the music.
So should we start charging licenses to Google to use our content?
Well, the interesting thing that was a question way back in the day. A lot of people, a lot of the newspapers said, you know what, we don't want to be on Google. We don't want them to.
That was a smart decision, wasn't it?
Well, the problem
it didn't work out real well.
Well, the problem is just the sheer numbers, right? It's like whether you like Facebook or not. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not.
Right.
Everybody's there, so you have to play in that.
Exactly,
Sandbox,
and that's where everybody is. So, that's what Google has created. But billions of dollars. It's the same bloody thing
I still think they should be held accountable if they bury a business on purpose and it was under false pretense. I still think that they should absolutely be held accountable.
But the definition of false pretense, that's the concept there.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
but let's say you're an e-commerce system, right?
Right.
And you're making millions of dollars a year. You have tons of employees and everything else, and through no fault of your own, Google decides to penalize you for something that they thought you were doing, and now all of a sudden you're laying off people and closing your doors because of a mistake.
Well, and that it's kind of the whole Spider-Man thing. With great power comes great responsibility, and you have, based on these decisions, people, companies going out of business and laying off. So there certainly is. But
they hold some responsibility. Is all I'm saying.
They do.
And I think this is the regulatory view too. That there's a difference between Google operating their own business and doing their thing, and Google being let's not use the M word, but not necessarily a monopoly, but a very, very, very large player who controls a very large percentage of our search fate.
Right.
At that point, when is their power too much, and when do we step in? And whether, the EU version of that versus the SEC's version of that are totally different. But, that's the argument, that at some point they control too much, and that power gets to tip.
But they're okay. I mean, Google's been to the White House 128 times during this administration, so they're getting clear
with a lot of checks.
Well, did you ever read? I forget the Google story, the story of Google, the book that came out.
No.
It was fascinating because they were in a lot of regulatory hell for a long time until they finally caved and said, we need to start lobbying. And they went out and started lobbying, and magically, all of the
doors started opening.
Magically, they stopped getting in trouble. Yeah.
Right. Okay, we're going to go way off the rail here. Let's come back around to Dr. Pete here. Now, you helped document and curate the algorithm changes on Moz. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, if you've been in SEO for a while, we track these major changes in the algorithm, in the code that runs Google search.
Right.
And every time there's a major change, then of course somebody goes up and somebody goes down, and as you say, fates are made and broken. But it was it's been 5-6 years now where we were tracking the big updates. And Google would announce something, SEOs would notice something, Webmaster World was good about this, they would give something a name, but we'd get about half a dozen of these a year. And in whenever it was, 2011, 2012, Eric Schmidt, who was then the CEO, had to testify before Congress for some monopolistic issues. And in his sworn testimony, he said that Google had made more than 500 changes, I think 512 changes that year to search.
Right. And that was the watershed moment there. We all realized.
It was a huge, I mean, the difference was orders of magnitude. We had named something like 5 things, and he said there were 500. So here we were, 99% were missing. And so, it really got me interested in this idea of how much of this are we missing because we're waiting for Google to tell us what happened. And the algorithm history was really just kind of self-education. I just wanted to go back and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to document this and try and fill my own gaps and see what's out there and put it all together. And a few years later, it's had over 1 million visits and, sort of made my whole job, sort of brought my whole job into existence. So it was kind of a happy accident.
Well, it's an incredible resource, and for those of you who have not seen it, go check it out on Moz. It's very easy to find, and it's an archive, and honestly, it's the history of SEO that goes right along with that. And it's kind of like Google playing whack-a-mole to a particular degree of certain exploits and how the contextual nature really started to wrap around what they were providing in the search results, and on top of that, what factors you could just see in the chronology, what factors that they were looking at as external factors that were weighing into it, and the explosion of not just a few metrics, but I mean we're way over 200 different factors that Google's paying attention to. And they're also testing at any given time, and that was what was really amazing from the last SMX is Google talking about the fact that any point in time you're experiencing, you're part of a test that's happening, and they're not only from user interaction and consumer behavior testing, but they're testing search layout. They're testing all these different things. So it's a constant whirling mechanism, and there's a constant, it's constantly choppy waters out there. The most recent changes. Can you actually go through a couple of the most recent changes that you're aware of from Google?
Yeah, a little bit of a mess this last 2 weeks.
Sure has.
It's keeping me busy. It's a drive to cut in. It's interesting. You mentioned the tests. Google published in 2012. This is on their site. They said that there were 665 launches. We don't know exactly what that means. 665 things were launched in search. If you go up the funnel, there were 118,000 different tests of some sort. Mm. And 10,000 actual experiments that people saw.
Oh, my Lord. So
they're testing hundreds of things every day.
Yeah. Was it testing 42 different shades of blue for the...
Oh, well, exactly, yeah. Sometimes that's what it is, and sometimes that's all it is. Or, spell check. They changed spell check for South Koreans.
Right.
For some subset of words. They can be small things. We've seen a lot of changes the last couple of weeks that were all on the user interface side, but are pretty major. They are testing the last 2 days, displaying everything in a more of what we call a card format.
Right.
So instead of the white page with the blue links and the occasional boxes, everything's going to be in a box. And they're testing moving some of the things we usually see in the right-hand column to the left, like the knowledge panels. Mm-hmm. So we don't know if that's going to roll out, but that's very consistent with what we've seen the last couple of years, which is Google is very concerned about mobile and how mobile affects their ad clicks. And so they switched to a mobile-first design philosophy. Everything is rolling out on mobile and then being adapted to desktop.
And that's a huge change. It's a huge pivot there.
It's a big change, and it's something I think they panicked in a sense. I mean, they saw rapidly declining click-through rates and ad revenue on mobile, and they knew they had to make a shift. And a multi-device kind of shift, things that would work on mobile and laptop and desktop and tablet. And so they're trying to build a more unified way of looking at things. I also think it's more modular. If they can get everything into a card, so to speak, they can mix and match. They could take one of those cards and show it to you on your watch. They can take a handful and show you on your phone. They can split it up into a couple columns on desktop. So they have a lot of options that aren't constrained to the size and type of your screen.
It's consumables and where you're consuming that content.
Yeah, and they could say, hey, we've got room for 3 of these. We've got room for 20 of these. Even things like voice. Hey, we're only going to be able to read one of these things to you. So let's figure out which of these match whatever you're asking for and whatever modality you're in.
Yep. There's certainly radical changes that are happening. I mean, in the last year to 2 years here, we've seen such a shift, and I mean, such an intentionality of getting closer and closer to what the user's wanting, what they're wanting to experience. Inside of the algorithms I should say the algorithm changes and the recorded changes, I mean, you're also getting, you're probably the closest one to be able to see these shifts and changes and starting to do some pattern recognition, understanding the size of changes, the efforts they do to do certain types of releases prior to a large change. So part of what your role has been is inside the Moz cast and actually understanding the actual kind of the weather patterns that you've described with this tool. And what I'd like to do is, coming back from the break, actually talk about predicting Google weather and seeing whether or not we can actually kind of get a handle on how they do what they do. So can you stick around and talk to us a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right, coming up, we're going to be talking to Dr. Meyers again with a focus on Google predictability, possibly, and looking at the weather, as well as talking about the keyword research tool, the Keyword Explorer that has come out of Moz. Coming up right after this. Thanks so much for staying with us, Dr. Meyers. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Cool. Well, you're speaking at SMX Advanced in a couple weeks. Can you tell us actually a little bit about what you're speaking about?
I'm in the middle of figuring that out. Unfortunately, SMX Advanced comes right after Google I/O, which is Google's big, I don't even know what you call it, their big announcement platform. And, look at all the things we're working on. And so none of us who have to talk about Google can start our decks until after Google I/O, which is about 3 weeks before SMX Advanced. So the charge is crazy. So I have the pleasure or curse, I don't know which it is, of having my session assigned to me. And I get a little bit of flack because it's one of the only sessions with the speaker's name in it. So it is called Dr. Pete's Guide to the Changing Google SERPs. And so the first thing I have to do is tell everybody that that's not my fault. That's Danny Sullivan's fault. And so I'm not really so much of an egotist that I put my own name in the title.
We seriously need to make that into like a futuristic book cover or something.
Or a cover of a pop can. I mean, Dr. Pete's. Oh, well, so you're kind of wrangling in what you're talking about there. But, I mean, honestly, with announcement like inside of I/O and just the speed in which things are changing inside Google, it is pretty precarious because you got to kind of stake your flag in what you're about to present, and you kind of need to get all your feelers out of how things are moving right now to be somewhat topical, don't you?
Yeah, you got to get it into some kind of a story. So, I'm going to talk about, it's kind of a roundup of all the things that have happened in the last year, but I'm going to talk a bit about the big ad change a few months ago. We lost the ads in the right-hand column. We added a fourth position on top, so obviously that was a big shakeup. Talk about some of these design changes, talk about where we're headed with the knowledge graph and featured snippets and things like that. So some of the things that I think will impact people that we can actually control that have happened in the last year. But it'll be a little bit of I always start with 5 or 6 scary screens. Here's some scary stuff to look at.
Freak out on this.
It's really just 25 minutes of that. Like check this out. Okay, now check this out.
So you're shot.
So they all want to go home. That's all it is.
We have to see that. You have to share that.
Yes, absolutely.
It will be online, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I got a question, and I just want to hear kind of your perception of this, Dr. P, on algorithms and how they've evolved. It's interesting to me. We had Neil Patel on a few weeks ago, and he talked about how he took a site basically from nothing to $100,000 a month, and it was a fresh domain, no history or anything like that. And he's a huge fan of backlinking, and it makes me wonder. Like, I've always looked at
and content. I mean,
of course,
really
of course,
content,
yeah. I'm not saying that he's a black hatter.
Right.
I'm just saying that his reliance seems heavy on, in my opinion. And the interesting thing to me is that, wouldn't it be easier for Google, and I'm curious about what your perception is of this, on using historical data? Site Strategics has how many years has your website been around? Right?
Yeah, from 2004.
Yeah. So 11 years. Same marketing tech blog, same thing. That we have a clean bill of health for so many years,
right,
that a competitor can't replicate that.
Right.
And I'm wondering why that isn't as large a factor. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like Google takes a look at fresh data all the time rather than
Constantly swooned as opposed to looking at some maybe older roots.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a balancing act that they've had trouble with. When they launched the in-depth articles a couple years ago, they basically said that you know there were all these searches where they were sort of too abstract, they were too broad for Google to know exactly what you wanted, and a lot of times what you wanted wasn't the most recent thing, but the best resource,
Mm-hmm.
and that resource could be a year old or 2 years old or 5 years old, and they've tried to work with that, and I think it's best is a really, really hard thing to measure.
Right.
And so what you see is that there are definitely, I'm a big evergreen content person. You know, in fact, I just have been developing some ways of trying to measure which of our posts have the most, you know, historical staying power, let's say, what a post from 3 years ago that still generates traffic.
Right.
And so I think a lot of it's indirect. They do it in the algorithm itself in the sense that if you have a site that's 5 years old and has a strong reputation, well, that site also is an entity in some ways. It has a huge link profile.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully most of it's positive. It has constant traffic coming in that they can see. It's got social shares. So there's a momentum you gain over time, and that momentum is so reflected in the algorithm that the age of the site itself or you know, something like that, they don't care about as much.
Right.
The other issue is that when they did I don't know if they've ever used domain age as a direct ranking factor. People have certainly claimed that.
Right.
The other thing they ran into is that what a lot of people did was just buy an old site that had a good history, that had a clean history, and 301 redirect it to their new awful site and try and basically buy that history.
Right. So
And that got to be abused.
So therein lies that one of those factors is that they're paying attention, but at the same time they have to be so guarded because the exploitation's out there that the ones that have the long-term domains really don't get the benefit that you didn't you'd expect to see.
Yeah, and
it's probably gone down over time. So even
Yeah.
history can be gamed, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I definitely don't mean, you know, from a length standpoint, like that just because my site is around longer, I should rank better.
Right.
All I mean is that you know that I'm a viable site because consistently, you know, however many changes a week have been happening forever, you know, and so it's nothing dramatically has shifted, not a ton of 301.
Yeah, and that's actually
or you've never penalized me in 8 years, so maybe
exactly.
I've been good. I've been
good. A little
good.
slack.
I did have that other domain though.
Well, Dr. Pete, what about Rank Brain? I wanted to throw that one out at you because Rank Brain was certainly the discussion points at SMX. I mean, AMP was also, all over the place. But Rank Brain and their inclusion of this it's not just the algorithm; it's the AI side of things and starting to take the humans out of the mix more than ever before. What are your thoughts about that?
Anything I say about Rank Brain is a guess.
It's true.
And anything anyone said about it at SMX was probably a guess, too.
Love that honesty.
We don't know a lot. So I'll tell you what I sort of know.
Mm-hmm.
So the announcement went out in October. We believe that Rank Brain has been in place since last spring.
Okay.
About a year. I've gone back and looked at the impact of things in the algorithm, and it's not clear. So we know machine learning, deep learning most likely is involved. So Google is, it's a complicated topic, but let's try and pin it down. Essentially, with machine learning, with what they call their supervised and unsupervised. So let's talk about supervised because it's kind of the easiest. We're going to feed it a bunch of inputs. We know a bunch of things about your site. We know how many links it has and click-through rates and whatever they are. I'm not saying these are the factors, but we have a bunch of factors. And we have a sense of what we think ranking should be. And maybe this is coming from human quality raters or whatever, but we have a sense of what it should be. Can we train a machine to do all the stuff in the middle? So instead of having 200 ranking factors or whatever they are, and that's a weird, we don't know if that number actually means much, but instead of having these dozens or hundreds of ranking factors, can we make the machine figure out what the factors are based on what we know and what we think the outcome should be? Now, is that what Google's doing? We don't know. That's probably a much, much bigger problem than they're actually pursuing. But that's the gist of where they could head down the road. The educated guesses seem to revolve around some kind of query interpretation that Google might be using machines to consolidate queries into some kind of concept. This is especially important in voice search, where I could have a really long search, natural language.
Right.
How do I turn that into something Google can kind of parse down to a few words or to something they understand? That's the speculation right now, but we don't know. I think Google is saying it's the third most important ranking factor. We don't really know what that means. We don't know if number one could be link, which could be 57 ranking factors. So we have to take that with a grain of salt.
Right.
But they're definitely claiming it's important. I think what's interesting about it, even given what we know and don't know, what's interesting is when you build that model, the thing about machine learning is everything in the middle is kind of a black box. And for us as SEOs, we don't really know how the algorithm works, but we're stepping into a world where even the people who build the algorithm aren't going to know how it works.
Right, and that's bloody scary right there.
It is, in a sense.
It's Skynet.
Machine learning is a powerful thing, but we don't know what happens in the middle. We know they know what they told it to do.
Right.
They don't know what happens in the middle. So, I think in 5 years we're going to reach a point where if I say to Google, why does my competitor outrank me? Right now they know, but they won't tell us.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 years, they won't even know.
No, that's that's
Wow.
scary. And Dr. Pete said it.
Right here.
In fact, that was one of my questions. Is what do you think you'd be talking to us about in 5 years back on the edge? Hopefully we'll talk to you sooner than that. But in 5 years' time, you're literally saying that the engine will be self-automated, just like the Google cars, right? It's going to be running itself, and we will have, it'll be even more impenetrable understanding why it's actually ranking, how it's ranking.
It will be, and in a way, I think maybe it'll be more organic. If Google starts training it on things like user signals,
Right.
I always want to be careful what I say, because if you say click-through rate, for example, people get upset.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say click-through rate is a ranking signal, but we know that Google looks at click-through rate as a quality signal,
Right.
to determine whether things work the way they thought they did or not. If nobody's clicking on things, that's a bad sign.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they look at things like what they call long clicks. So essentially, if I click on your link, you rank for something, and I bounce right back, and I don't look at anything, that's not a great sign.
Mm-mm. No,
If I click on your link and I'm gone for 10 minutes,
right,
and I come back, that's a pretty good sign.
That's a deep dive. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we think that kind of thing is going to factor in more. And any of those things by themselves, people will say, "Oh, well, that's too easy to game," or "That's not reliable." Well, true. Any of those things by itself isn't reliable, but you get enough of those signals and put them all together, and you can probably train a machine on it. So I think the actual objective quality of what we do, it will become more important, and I think it'll lead to less gaming of the system.
Right.
But is the system going to do some things we didn't expect it to, and will some of those things not be great? Probably. So it's tough, and it's tough to know what we know what the outcome. A self-driving car, we want it to get from point A to point B and not crash.
Right.
And we know what we're trying to get it to do. With Google, they're trying to get the machine to return the best search result, and that's a really, really tough thing to define.
Because it's subjective.
Yeah, it is. It can be very subjective. There are things where Google is going to say plainly, if I search for IBM, then IBM.com should be at the top, or else we're going to look stupid. There's what they call dominant intent.
Right.
There's an intent around that everybody kind of knows what you mean. But there's so many searches where that's not true and where quality is subjective that even the task of measuring what's a good result is going to evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the search team, Amit, who left now, there's reason to believe that he was pretty skeptical of using machine learning, and now he was replaced by the person who was sort of led.
I thought you were going to say he was replaced by the machine.
I don't want to. I'm not going to make any rumors or speculation about Google Cloud, but it's pretty clear that Google has taken the person who was skeptical, that person is gone, and the person who is the opposite of skeptical is now in charge. So are we going to see more machine learning? Yeah.
Probably much, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, too. I think the other side of that is we don't even know how we're going to interact with search engines in 5 years, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be so dramatically different an experience.
I have an Amazon Echo.
Yeah, exactly.
Version at Google I/O. You know, I'm in my kitchen. I just talk to it. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old, the way she interacts with that machine and the way I do, completely different.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
You know, and that's I don't. Google doesn't even know.
You're not buying her smartphone when she turns 10, though, right?
No.
I'm trying to desperately avoid it.
That was part of the news today.
She has learned that the entire Alvin and the Chipmunks song library is on Amazon Prime, so I'm real excited.
Oh, it kills me. It kills me.
Oh, my gosh.
I walk into that every day.
And my Amazon shopping list is basically just butt over and over again. Now that my children know how to add to it.
That's fantastic.
But they do. They to see them because for me, I have to learn what it can do. I'm 45. You know, I have to learn what it can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter how open-minded I am. But she just walks up and asks it a question. She walked up to the other day, Alexa, you know, how big is the sun? I'm like, it doesn't know that. And then, you know, boom.
Yeah.
There it goes. I'm like, oh, well, all right. I guess you know who you should ask your school questions to now.
How much does the Earth weigh is the funny one.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It goes on for like 5 minutes.
My kids love those iPhone hacks. It was 0 divided by 0. It keeps on going and go. You know, the fact of the matter is, you were talking about intuitive understanding, and the devices and technology have done such a fantastic job getting getting rid of all of the architecture, all the chrome. Right, of the interaction and getting into the true interactive space, and we certainly understand that's what Google's trying to do with the machine learning environment. But you look around you, and everything is coming closer and closer to removing any obstacles to getting what you want, how to communicate and how to exchange information.
Yeah, but humans are terrible at communicating, and we're writing software
to help us out.
So we could go one of two directions here.
Go really, really bad.
Yeah.
Dr. Pete, the last few minutes we got with you, what kind of bugs you about your industry right now? Can you give me a perspective there? And you can be nice. It's okay.
It's tough.
Choosing his words wisely.
When you've been in an industry long enough.
Name them by name, buddy.
Everything bugs you.
Call them out.
It depends on the day, and it's Friday, so I'm especially bugged by Google this week. I think the big thing that still concerns me as much as I study Google is our over-reliance on them as marketers. Mm. The number of times I look at sites, whether Google is good or bad, put it aside, number of times I look at sites who are still 95% of their business model relies on Google. As an SEO, that's great for my job.
Absolutely.
As a general marketer, that's terrifying.
Because you're completely beholden.
Completely. And that lack of diversity in what we're doing, and the lack of wanting to kind of see beyond. I used to do paid search, and I know a lot of SEOs who they don't want anything to do with paid search, and a lot of PPC people want nothing to do with organic, and it's so short-sighted sometimes as marketers to not understand both sides. Where if I'm trying to compete for engagement rings, and there's 8 shopping results and 4 ads at the top, and the number 1 organic is pushed below the fold, and I'm ignoring paid search, what am I doing? I think
you're kind of cutting your nose despite your face. I mean, if you're trying to be a purist in that space, I mean, we have to understand that we're in a space where it's the consumer behavior that you have to be in front of. I mean, and obviously the platforms in which they're engaging are always changing. But I mean, you've got to manage the portfolio. You just can't go after one particular environment and expect that you have a scalability or a predictability of your revenue over a period of time, because it's going to change.
Well, the example I love giving is, Jay Baer, I think, did analysis with Edison Research, that the average blog post costs a company around $700, because of everything, right? Infrastructure, time, employment, all of the overall cost to that. And so I always tell people, I love PPC. We don't do PPC for our clients, but I love the data from PPC because I can save them a ton of money by focusing their content on the right content.
Absolutely.
There's for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, and just the general attitude that just ranking for something or generating traffic from something is not by itself of value.
Yeah.
Traffic costs you money. the end of the day, it doesn't cost a lot, but you pay for hosting and you pay for bandwidth, and the more traffic you get, the more downtime you have. It's not a good thing by itself. And so, I think there's much more willingness to try and understand that whole chain. But search is an important beginning to that whole marketing journey. But yeah, we have to think a lot more broadly.
It's not in its entirety where your consumer's living.
Well, I love hearing that, because even a company that we've seen it, right? We've had clients that have just been gaming, and they spend an inordinate amount of time, of resources and time, just trying to game the system. And if they just put those same resources in some great content, it would reverse the trend. But they can't get depth with their content strategy. They can't get depth with their overall marketing strategy, because they're chasing this, ridiculous. And just like you said, I mean, the telltale for us is, great, we have 5,000 people going to your site and nobody's converting because of search.
Right.
And it's broader than search. I complain like everybody about the airlines, and I won't name the specific ones I complain about, because it's most of them.
Delta, American.
Everyone except JetBlue and Alaska for me. But how many companies are out there spending millions and millions on rebrands and coming up with slogans to convince me that their service is better, instead of just being better?
Cough TSA.
Oh, yeah.
How many people are out there spending millions on online marketing instead of actually improving their product?
No, did you see that?
Yeah.
Did you see the TSA is spending $2 million a year now on PR?
Trying to spin.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Chicago, 150 people missed their flights on the weekend.
Fix the problem.
That's my backyard, so believe me. Know that pain point.
I did want to at least carve out a small piece of time here. Again, we truly appreciate your being with us on the show. Wanted to showcase the Keyword Explorer, because you were also involved in the development of that as well, right?
I was, yes.
Tell us a little bit about the Keyword Explorer. And for those of you who are listening who have not experienced Moz.com, wow, what a ride it's been. The tool set's improving over time. It's a great application, and the pro user, I mean, it's a very inexpensive and a very valuable set of resources. So I'll set you up that way, Dr. Pete, but take me into what you've been able to develop inside the Keyword Explorer.
Yeah, let me just kind of talk about it conceptually. I don't want to overpitch, and it's been a long ride for us. A couple of years ago, we had one product, and now I think we have 6, and we're still, and as marketers, we're still trying to figure out how to cope with that and what that means. But we wanted to, if you've ever done keyword research, which is kind of a foundational activity of SEO, what do I want to rank for? First, I have to make that list. What we do is we go to a whole bunch of different tools. We pull out hundreds and hundreds of keywords. We mash them all up in an Excel spreadsheet until we have thousands.
Yep.
And then we feel good about ourselves for about half an hour. And then we realize we have no idea what to do next or where to start. I apologize. That's my "you better go pick up the children soon" alarm. So we get this mega list of all the words. We do this paid search too, all the words we can think of, and then we kind of sit there and realize that now we have to figure out which ones are actually good.
Right.
And even coming up with that list is a very, very tedious manual process. And about 2 years ago, we got to thinking, could we know, as SEOs, we know what that process is like. Could we maybe not automate it, but could we semi-automate it? Could we help you do the process we know we all do every day? And so Keyword Explorer was born out of that, and it's two things. It's a keyword suggestion engine, so you can go in and type in a keyword, and multiple sources, and actually, speaking of machine learning, some pretty advanced concept matching that our data science team has built to basically say, hey, based on your keyword, here's a dozen more or a few dozen more we think might be interesting. We'll help you put all those in the list. We'll help you build that list from all the sources you're used to going to. But then the part I was involved with was a scoring system where once you have all those, we're going to look at some factors. The one we traditionally look at is keyword volume. How many searches get made on this?
Which kind of ties into the competitive nature of the keyword itself.
Right. Yeah, obviously we'd rather rank for something that gets 1 million searches than 4. Okay, we all know that.
Yep.
But the problem with that is it doesn't tell you some things. It doesn't tell you, first of all, the more volume a keyword has, usually the harder it'll be to rank on. So what am I up against? So we have a metric called keyword difficulty that's just been, we've had it for a while, but just been recreated. I'm very interested in all these things going on in the SERP. You know, we have ads at the top, we have knowledge panels, we have news and in-depth and images and answer boxes and all these things that can potentially take away from clicks. And so if something is really loaded with that, or if something is really dominated by a brand, it doesn't help me if it gets a million clicks if there's nothing left. You know, if there's no organic left to click on, or the best I could be is number 4. And so we have this metric called opportunity that looks at that. It looks at all these things happening around the blue links and subtracts it all out. This page is full of ads and shopping and knowledge panel, and number 1 is dominated by a brand.
Right.
You probably shouldn't bother. And we take all these metrics and we mash them up and we come up with a score to basically say, hey, if we look at the volume and the opportunity and the difficulty and your own intuition, we let you score that of how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of the weighted value of this keyword? You know, what keyword should you really go after? And we try to help you determine what that is. So we try and help you create this list and then make sense of it. It all in one holistic process. So yeah, it works. Some of those ideas are new, and they're going to take some evolution. And there's a little bit of math magic, and hopefully not too much hand waving behind it.
Well, I mean, it's
a lot of work behind it, but.
I mean, how long did it take to actually roll this one out? Because I know you took it seriously, and you wanted to give a really useful tool to the Mozzers that are inside your system there. How long did it take to develop this?
It's been almost 2 years.
Really? Yeah. And this pulls from a lot of different sources, like Keyword Planner data, Google Suggest, and different related searches. So this is much more than just a reburnishing of the Keyword Planner tool, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We're trying to get data from a lot of sources, and we have our own conceptual matching engine to try and kind of tell you what things are related to what you're looking at, and and hopefully, really, from a UI perspective, I think, really, we're trying to make it intuitive. All these scores sound very complicated, but the idea at the end of the day is you've got a long list, and if you're really hardcore technical SEO and you want to dig into each of these individual scores, we're going to give them to you. If you want to look at that list and you want us to tell you where to start, we're going to give you that too.
And you're getting accurate volume as well, as opposed to secondhand third-party tools. I mean, you're piping it straight in from Google, correct?
It is a little more complicated than that, but yeah.
Okay.
So my colleague Russ Jones just had a blog post.
They've written an algorithm that writes algorithms. That
that one's not quite. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. Yeah, we're trying to. So the Google data needs a lot of interpreting.
Uh-huh.
One of the things Google does that's a little sneaky is if you look at a bunch of keyword volumes from Google, you'll see the same numbers happening over and over, the same very specific numbers. And I'm just going to make this up because I can't remember one, but you'll have a list of 100 keywords, and 17 of them got exactly 3,508 clicks.
Right.
And you go, well, that looks a little weird. And so it turns out that Google bins their data, but they make it look like they don't.
Okay.
And so the numbers you get back aren't actually exact numbers. And so part of the process we got into is trying to interpret what that meant and make that a little more useful and tie in some other data sources. Google has pulled back a lot of their volume data, kind of like not provided. They've taken a lot of data away. And so we tried to look at a few sources, and that's something the team spent a long time on, is the new volume model, and that we're going to keep working on over the next couple of years.
Very cool. Well, it certainly is a useful tool, and you can actually use it for free a couple times, I think, online. If you're a pro user, you already have that in your toolbox, so go check that out. We certainly give thumbs up on that. That's a fantastic tool you guys rolled out there. A couple last questions here, real quick. I know you gotta jump here. We wanted to ask you. We asked you an amazing but true fact about yourself. So hit us. What you got? You shared something with us in our pre-show question. Now I absolutely wanted to hear about what you did there.
It's been such a long week. Remind me what I said.
Well, you made a dumb bet. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah. So back in 2012, I think it was. I was in some online fitness community, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to do for next year. What's our typical dumb New Year's resolution that we'll probably all not keep come mid-January. And somebody said, let's do 100 push-ups a day for all of 2012. This was the end of 2011.
Okay.
And about half a dozen of us were like, sure, what the heck, that's stupid, but sure, let's try. And I think, I don't know if I was drinking or what I was doing.
It always starts that way.
Let's just make it an even. I don't like that number. Let's make it an even 50,000.
Oh my Lord.
And so about half a dozen of us did, and sure enough, people started disappearing. And
not answering your calls,
never to be heard. Right, not answering their phones, their text messages, never to be heard from again. And it was funny, and so it became not to get too much into like the self-motivation world, but it became kind of a math problem for me. And I said, you know what? If I did it 6 days a week, it's 165 or whatever it was, around 160 each of those days. Obviously, I can't do 160 push-ups in one set. That's probably not going to happen. But could I do 16 sets of 10 or 32 sets of 5?
See, the geek was shining through.
Exactly. No, it became a math problem. And I said, well, you know what? If I make it small enough, it's possible.
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
You're right. I could do one push-up 165 times a day. Maybe not real practical. My wife might get a little annoyed when my alarm went off every 11 minutes. Or on the bus or wherever I was. So it was funny, but the long story short is I got to the end of the year, and I had done it. And it was strange because it kind of got to be a fascination for me. I'm really bad at those New Year's resolutions, and I started to think in terms of these year-long goals, and it just kind of changed the way I thought about things. And do I recommend anybody do this? Not really. My chiropractor bills probably went up. I'm not sure this was the sanest fitness program. But I ran the Chicago Marathon next year. My wife's a runner, and I kind of have taken that year-long mentality with me. So it's been
funny. Well, I thank you so much for being on the show, and I will not take your challenge on the 50,000 push-ups in 2012. Per your recommendation, Dr. Pete, I should not do it. So I'm just going to follow the doctor's advice. Hey, where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
If you go to drpete.co, I still have a site there, and you can see my Are You a Real Doctor page. Yep. And otherwise, you can find me on the Moz blog or on Twitter at dr_Pete, and that is probably where I am the most vocal and ridiculous. So if you want to see me at my best and worst, then join me on Twitter.
Fantastic.
Just make sure you share the show, or we'll talk about you behind your back.
Wow, way to end the interview, Doug.
We're all marketers here.
That's a little bit of extortion. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed the time today that you're able to say. Good luck in the SMX Advanced presentation. We know you'll do a good job there, obviously, and we'll certainly be watching as you're putting forth a great deal of information inside the algorithm viewport, so to speak. You need to disseminate that to the rest of us and fight the good fight. All right.
We'll keep doing that.
Thanks
for having me on the show.
You're more than welcome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Pete.
All right. Take care.